Mark Chestnut here from LatinFlyer.com, and I just landed here at New York's JFK Airport after what was a very stressful trip home. They almost did not let me on the plane because of one thing that was wrong with my COVID-19 test results. And meanwhile, my test results were negative. So how can you avoid this kind of hassle when you fly back to the United States from an international trip? Well, I'm here to tell you how.
Unfortunately, this is the second time in 2 months, 2 trips in a row, as a matter of fact, that I've had problems with COVID tests while traveling. And both times, I've almost missed my flight home. So I have learned a few things that might be able to help you to avoid the hassles that I've had to face. One thing that's very important to keep in mind is that pandemic travel requirements have already changed several times, and they'll probably change again and keep changing. So my travel tips are based on the current and the latest requirements, but you should always double check for the latest guidelines with your airline and with the government websites before you actually travel, so you'll be right up to date. So here are a few of my tips on how to avoid problems with COVID-19 tests when you're flying to the USA from abroad. The first thing to be aware of is the latest rule for international travel to the USA. Now you have got to get your COVID test within 24 hours of your flight into the United States. So you should need to be sure to find out where to get tested and to schedule your test in the right time frame, because that time frame has changed. And remember, the antigen test is the fastest and it's accepted for entry into the United States. So that's the one that you'll probably want to go to. Number 2 is to bring your passport when you go to take the test, because you'll need to present identification at the time of the test taking. Number 3 is where we really get into some of the trickier little things that have given me trouble recently. So I hope that won't cause trouble for you once you hear this. First, make sure that the people who give you the COVID-19 test, the lab people, put your actual exact birth date on the test results. Last month, I got tested in Mexico before flying home to the US, and they put my age, but not my birth date. I didn't notice that. I didn't know that I should be on the lookout for that. So when I tried to check in online, the results were rejected for that very reason. So they wouldn't check me in. I couldn't get a boarding pass. I had to frantically text and call the lab just before my departure on that very day to get a corrected version sent to me via WhatsApp, via text. So take a lesson from my little nervous nightmare and make sure your birth date is on there before it's time to check in. Tip number 4 is also a lesson learned from my own unfortunate problems. In fact, I almost wasn't allowed on a plane in Mexico just this week because of it, and that's how this whole video came about. I'd already learned to double check and make sure that my birth date was on the form, so that was. So I thought I was in perfect shape and ready to fly. But then when I arrived at the airport in Tuxtla Gutierrez, Mexico at 4 a.m. just a couple days ago, the ticket agent said that he could not give me a boarding pass to New York City because the lab that did my COVID test this time had put the wrong date on my test result form, saying that it was done 2 days before my departure instead of 1 day. And with the new regulations, 2 days doesn't work. It has to be within 24 hours. So I was going to have to fly to Mexico City, that's as far as I could get, and take a second test in a big rush at the airport site. But luckily, I was able to call the lab that had made the mistake, and they sent a corrected form via WhatsApp. Fortunately, it was fast enough that I was able to make my connection. But make sure the test date is correct from the moment that you take the test and get the results. Now, these are the things that you can make sure that the lab enters correctly at the time of your test, of course, but also make sure to check as soon as you receive the results, whether you get them by email, by WhatsApp, or in person. That way, you'll have more time to correct any mistakes. Tip number 5 is to take a screenshot of your test results, since you may not have good access to a signal, a Wi-Fi signal, or connection at the airport to bring up something else on your phone. You might also want to print it out too if possible, or get a printed version if that's possible from the lab you're working with. Tip 6. Use VeriFly if the airline you're flying offers it. Now, VeriFly is an app that allows you to upload the test results directly, so then you can check in online and or also using the airline app, and that way you may get to skip the ticket counter line at the airport. Now, to be honest, VeriFly is kind of a pain to use. I don't love it, but it can smooth your departure if all things go well. Not every airline offers it though, so it really depends on who you're flying with. Tip 7, speaking of which, number 7 is to check in online or via the airline's app whenever you can. It will definitely save you some time. I believe that when you do that, you can also fill out an attestation form if you're flying from Mexico to the United States, and you'll need to hand that in at the airport. If not, you will get it at the airport to fill out. You may, however, find that you're not able to check in early using the app or online, but it's worth a try if you can. Tip 8 is to have your vaccination card handy. You'll need to present it at some point in the airport. At least in Mexico, that's how it was the last time I flew. And number 9, speaking of airports, number 9 is to arrive earlier than you would usually arrive for your international flight back to the United States. Why? Because the process is more complicated today than ever, so you need to build in the extra time. In addition to showing them your COVID-19 test results, you have to show it to a human usually, and the vaccine card, and if it's Mexico, you'll also need to fill out a health questionnaire, or attestation I think they call it. Overall, travel is not what it used to be, but when you stay informed about what's required and you learn from some of my problems that I've gone through, you should be in better shape to have an easier trip. So how do all of these complications make you feel as a traveler? I just had 2 bad experiences in a row with 2 of my trips where I wasn't sure if I could even fly home at the time that I was supposed to. And that is frustrating. It's annoying, and it gets people upset, and understandably so. Let me tell you, when you're standing in an airport at 4 a.m. in Tuxtla Gutierrez and being told that you can't fly home, it kind of makes you just want to stop taking trips. I'm standing there fuming at no one in particular because it's not the airport person's fault, but I'm thinking, why does this have to happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? But then I realize, okay, this is not good, but maybe it's good that it's happening to me because I'm a travel writer, I'm a content producer, and I can share what I've learned and my experiences with other people, with you, so maybe you'll be less likely to have to go through the same bad experience. So even as I was stomping through the airport terminal with my face all pink with frustration, it's always kind of pink anyway, I tried also to remind myself that yes, it is worth it. If you're lucky enough to travel, don't ever forget that how precious that right and that ability is. I feel lucky to be able to travel. A lot of people only dream about doing it. So if you are able to travel, make the most of it, enjoy it as much as you can, and appreciate the fact that you can do so. Just take the precautions, stay up to date on what the requirements are, so you can make sure that things go as smoothly as possible. I hope that eventually travel will get to be a bit easier, a bit less complicated again. But even now, I'm going to keep flying. I'm going to keep sharing my travel tips on latinflyer.com and on my YouTube channel, Latin Flyer TV. And I look forward to hearing more from you, your questions, and your own experiences. So thank you so much for checking out my presentation here, and happy travels, muy buen viaje.